All right. Well, I want to welcome you all on behalf of the University of Florida IFAS Extension Polk County. Welcome to our webinar on Ask the Experts. We're going to talk about general gardening and landscaping topics today. Today we have with us Ann Yazelanis. She's the Residential Horticulture Agent and Master Gardener Volunteer Coordinator, and I'm Julie Shelb, the Florida Friendly Landscaping Coordinator. Your expert panel today consists of Celia, Dave, and Joe, and so they will be answering your gardening questions. For those of you joining on Zoom, just a quick introduction to Zoom. We'd ask that you keep your microphones muted. If you have trouble hearing, you can just select the arrow next to the microphone and try to make sure your audio is working. We'd ask that you not start your video just so everyone can see our panelists today. You can see the participant list here. If you have any questions, we'd love for you to type those in chat throughout our discussion today, and we'll do our best to answer those or give you a great resource to help you with that. And if you need to leave, if you're joining with Zoom, you can just click Leave Meeting. And for those of you on Facebook, welcome, and you can feel free to type questions in the chat on Facebook Live as well. You can also use the raise hand feature on Zoom if you're joining that way. We will be sending out a short evaluation following the webinar, and so we really appreciate your feedback on that. And so today, Ask the Experts, Gardening and Landscaping. And so we've come up with a few topics to get started. And so Ann, I'll pass it on to you.
Great, thank you, Julie. I'm going to turn my video off so that our experts can be sent to the top and everybody can see their picture. So we did have questions come in on the topics that you'll see on your screen, and we're going to kind of roll through those topic areas. And so if you have questions on any of those topics as we're discussing them, you can type them in the chat and we'll answer them as we go along. And then obviously if you have other questions, we'll get those as well, and you can type those in anytime, or you wait till the end, or whatever is easiest for you. So we will get started. I'm going to open my chat so I can see that.
Well, Ann, don't forget to tell them about the Christmas tree.
Oh, yes. So yeah, the picture here is a Christmas tree that is a locally harvested, I think from the Lake Wales forest that our Natural Resources Extension Agent harvests. So there are places you can get a local Christmas tree, which is kind of fun. And we will actually share a fact sheet that Shannon Carnevale, our Natural Resources Extension Agent, has written on Christmas trees locally. So that's kind of a fun way to start since we're into December. Okay, so we're going to start on some palm care because we got some questions on that. And palm care is a deep and long topic to discuss. So we're not going to get really far into it, and we're just going to kind of discuss some of the questions that came in. But obviously, if you have more, you can ask. So some of the questions that came in had to do with pruning. So we're going to quickly talk about pruning palms. We have a really nice picture to show. Joe, do you want to get us started on pruning and how to properly do that?
Sure. You see the picture before, and you see the picture on the right, the over pruning. Unfortunately, this is all too common. And honestly, it can kill a palm. I've seen it. I've seen neighbors who have had palms pruned like this, and they're dead. They die within a few months sometimes. Usually the general rule for pruning palms is only prune brown material. If a frond is dead, you can prune it off. If it's green, don't. Okay, so that's the general rule, and it's the best rule to follow. Don't prune off green fronds, prune off only brown ones. There isn't.
Thanks, Joe. That makes it very easy to understand rather than all the other rules. Were you going to say something else about that?
Yeah, I was going to say that the middle picture there, there is one exception that can be done. Not as good as don't prune at all, but it's, if you think of a clock with hands at 3 and 9, okay, obviously not a digital clock. If the hands are at 3 and 9, so you've got sort of a horizontal line across the top, across right at the top of the trunk, you can prune up to there. Okay, so that's about the way you prune palms. It's not more complicated than that.
Hey, Joe, I have a question. I've seen people go and just cut off the flowering part of the palm. Does that hurt it?
Not particularly, no. No, you can prune the fruit off. Generally speaking, you'll see the fruit, not the flowers. And you can prune the fruit off anytime. In fact, a lot of people like to, because some of the palms make a real mess. The fruit can make a real mess, but you don't have to prune it. You can if you want.
Thanks, Joe. And yeah, over pruning is, you know, there's no way to hurricane prune or any of those types of things for palms. It actually makes them more weak and susceptible to things when they are over pruned. So that acceptable pruning is about as much as you want to get. And you can see here, the picture on the left is a nice example of cabbage palms and that nice full head of fronds that they have there. The picture on the right, on the other hand, has some fertilization needs. And I'll ask Dave, do you want to talk a little bit about the nutrient issues that palms have and the fertilizer that is important to think about with palms?
Yeah, sure. There's one thing I want to kind of just go back a second on pruning. If you're pruning multiple trees, or if you're even having a lawn service or a tree service come prune your trees, one thing you've got to absolutely make sure that they do is that in between moving from one tree to the next, they must sanitize their pruning tools. If one tree has a disease that hasn't manifested itself yet, that is a surefire way of taking a unhealthy tree that's got a disease and spreading it to a healthy tree. Is just through pruning tools. And we've got some literature, if you want to call our plant clinic later on solutions that can be used in anything from just regular rubbing alcohol to water and bleach, things like that. But it's just a simple process of just making sure that your pruning tools are clean. And that rule probably goes for any kind of pruning that you're doing in the yard whatsoever. Okay, going back to the fertilizer. Most all palm trees have a magnesium deficiency here. Our soils are so sandy here in Florida. Nutrients tend to leach out very quickly. And what you see on the right there is a typical example of a manganese deficiency, or a magnesium deficiency in palm trees. And that's not all of them all varieties of palm trees manifest themselves that way, but nearly every single one that grows well here in Florida does. So what you need to do is make sure that you're using the correct fertilizer on a routine, regular, recurring basis to keep your palms healthy and prevent from manifesting what you see there. Now, the university does recommend a specific type of fertilizer for palms. This fertilizer can be used not only, specifically made for palm trees here in Florida, but it can be used in other applications, lawn fertilizer. It contains the nutrients that almost every plant needs here in Florida. And I don't know if you've got a copy of that, what we recommend. If we don't have a slide to show, there's Julie just sent in the chat box a link to that website. But no matter what you get, just make sure that all the nutrients are slow release and that we recommend those. Now, and you also got to get your palms on a regimen of fertilization. And most of our documentation says about the fertilizer with slow release fertilizer here that we recommend. It lasts about 3 months max. So you'd have to be on a routine of applying fertilizer about every 4 times a year. Now, one thing to keep in mind, once you see a tree that's manifesting itself like this, it may take the tree up to 2 to 3 years to correct itself, for it to absorb enough of the manganese to where you don't see this. So don't, if you go out, if your tree's doing this and you go get the fertilizer, start applying it, don't be discouraged that it doesn't correct itself right away. Those palms will have to go through their life cycle and fall off, and then the available nutrients from the fertilizer will be reabsorbed into the newer growth up top. I think I've beat that dead horse enough. Anybody else got any comments?
Thanks, Dave. Does anybody have anything to add? I will say in the chat, they were asking about sources for the fertilizer. And Julie did put in the chat also a couple of links to some of our IFAS publications on palm fertilizer. There's some good ones showing pictures of the bag and what to look for on the bag so that you make sure that you're purchasing the right product. And so, look to a nursery or a place where you purchase fertilizer for those items. And I know in the past that they've had the brand at Site 1 in Lakeland. If anybody else has seen it anywhere else, type that in the chat if you know where you can buy the recommended palm fertilizer. I'm sure there's more places. We just have to share those and let other people know as well.
Yeah, when you do go to purchase it, find out, go get the stuff that the university recommends. Go to the website Julie put, and there may be the exact same nutrients in bag A and bag B and bag C, but the form in which those nutrients are made available are different. So you've really got to read closely the bag. Kieserite is one thing for your magnesium that needs to be the form that is used, and the best that you can get is all of the ingredients, all the nutrients are made available to the tree in the slow release form. Some have quick release, and what happens, a heavy rain comes and it just leaches right through, and then those can actually exacerbate nutritional problems in palms.
Great.
Okay, to add a little bit, the appropriate numbers for the fertilizer bag, the numbers on the front of the bag should be 8, 2, 12, 4. The 8 would be the percent of nitrogen in the bag. The 2 is phosphorus. We don't need a lot of phosphorus. We don't need to add a lot of phosphorus to our soils. 12 is potassium. So the 8 and the 12, that's an unusual mix. You won't find that except in the palm fertilizer. And the last one, 4, is very unusual on a bag of fertilizer. It's magnesium. So it's really telling you that your fertilizer should have a ratio of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium of 8 to 12, and then 4. Okay. So you might see that you'll find that again in the literature they mentioned, and but just to complete that's what's recommended.
Great, thank you, Joe. Okay, if there's any questions on palms, I think we're kind of coming to the end of our palm segment, and if you do have other questions later on that you think about, you can type them in. Obviously, anytime. We're going to move on to some general pruning, and this is more focused on tree pruning, because we did get some questions on tree pruning. And the first thing we were going to talk about is this 3-step method for pruning branches of a diameter larger than 1 inch. Celia, do you want to talk about that at all?
Sure. So first you cut on the bottom of the branch between the collar. See, the collar is that part that's kind of swollen around the branch meets the main trunk of the tree. So you're cutting I don't know what they call it now, but I used to call it a relief cut. So cut through about halfway on the bottom, then cut through the rest of the way about halfway on the top, further out from the trunk. So as you can see in picture number 3, That gives a branch a place to break without tearing any bark off the trunk. And then the fourth step, actually, I suppose this should be step 4, is to go and smooth the branch off so that it gets close, your cut is close to the collar, and hopefully your tree will grow bark over that stub. Also, I gotta say, if you are cutting a branch that big, you better get somebody to help you so it doesn't fall on your head when it falls. So be careful, okay?
Thanks, Celia. And again, the reason for this 3-step method is not to make more work, but if you were to just straight cut a branch of this size, what would happen instead of that second cut ripping, it would actually rip into the nice cut that you're trying to make. So this is all to get a nice clean cut and have no, bark tearing or anything like that when you're cutting a branch of a larger size.
Well, it's not just the branch, it'll also rip the bark right off the trunk.
Right. Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. So that's what we're trying to avoid here as well.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else have anything to add? Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, one thing to notice on that cut is it's vertical. That final picture, that cut is vertical. Okay. In other words, you didn't slant the cut in towards the tree at the bottom. You want that totally vertical.
And yes, any tree, any deciduous tree or pine tree or something like that. Yes, this will work.
Thank you. So next we're going to talk a little bit about, these are the cuts that we were talking about. This would be a removal cut. Dave, do you have anything you want to talk about some of these pruning cuts here?
Uh-oh.
You're on mute. And we are going to talk about crepe myrtles in just a second. And there was a question.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, I guess the first thing was, why do we prune in the first place? It's, overall aesthetics. You make the tree look a little better, or your plant that you're pruning, you make it look better, or, invigorate the growth if it's declining somewhat for some reason, or if it's got just misshapen, or if you've got a tree that's actually competing with itself, where you've got more than one main lead. As you look at the picture, the diagram there, you can see this particular tree has a very strong central lead that goes from the trunk all the way straight up. Oftentimes, some of those branching branches may start competing. They get a little better sunlight, so they're growing faster, and they want to take over as a dominant. So that's that's one of the reasons why you'll do some pruning cuts. The thing is, when you make a pruning cut of any type, you need to be careful on how you make the cut. There are certain places in the tree that you could cut too close to the branch or the main trunk, and you see it's called a flush cut. You see that all too often. That is actually unhealthy for the tree. The tree back at the bud, you can see it kind of swells when a branch comes off of another main branch. It starts swelling, and that's called the branch collar. You need to make your prune cuts outside of that branch collar. And what the branch collar is kind of unique because they got a different makeup where they'll actually heal themselves if a pruning cut is done properly. They'll actually swell over and compartmentalize the dead wood that is left on every prune cut. You will have dead wood, but the tree will actually compartmentalize the dead and keep disease out of the tree, also insects. It'll keep insects out of that, and it'll take some time. But I think we've got some pictures on showing proper cuts and improper cuts later on here in the video.
Yeah, thank you so much. So we did have questions and often get questions on specifically pruning crepe myrtles. Those are just a really common tree that are often pruned incorrectly. So we kind of wanted to talk a little bit about that, as I think people are starting to do some pruning on their crepe myrtles. Joe, do you want to start off the conversation on crepe myrtle pruning?
Okay. If you look at the picture on the bottom right, that unfortunately is the way you see an awful lot of prunings done. It's called Crepe Myrtle. It's not healthy for the tree. The best way to prune a Crepe Myrtle is as you would any other tree, any other landscape tree. Okay, so in other words, you prune dead stuff out, you prune cross branches, you may have to make a reduction cut here or there to get structure correct. But other than that, you don't prune them back. Okay, I mean, you see this all the time. I don't know why it's called pollarding, but it's not healthy for the tree, and it's not particularly good for blooming. You get to end up with a kind of a bunch. Maybe if it's a single trunk, you might look like a lollipop, but it's not good for the tree. So you prune it like you would any other tree for structure, so that the tree is healthy, and then keep it properly fertilized and watered, and you should have good bloom.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. Also, as the new growth happens after these cuts are made, you have a whole bunch of smaller branches starting at all these points where it was cut, and those are all very weak branches as well. So we've then encouraged a bunch of issues if there's wind or breakage or that sort of thing. Celia, you want to add something there?
Well, just that I spoke with a gentleman earlier this week about crepe myrtles, and he wanted more blooms on his crepe myrtles. Well, if you think about it, a crepe myrtle that's murdered has to grow a whole new branch before it can actually start to bloom. Whereas if you leave the branches in place, it can start to bloom much earlier, and you'll get bigger, better, more gorgeous flowers. Also, don't forget, crepe myrtles come in different sizes. You can buy shrub crepe myrtles or tree crepe myrtles. If your crepe myrtle is so big that you have to whack it back every year in order to be comfortable with it, maybe you should dig it out and plant a smaller variety.
Yeah, adding one thing to what we said is you prune when it's dormant, generally speaking. Okay, so anytime now until March, I suppose, April, March, whenever, that's when you prune. If you need to prune it for structure, you prune it this time of year when it's dormant.
Yeah, when Joe is saying prune it for structure, he means so that it looks pretty and so that there's air circulation inside the crepe myrtle, right, Joe?
Well, that as well as strength.
Uh-huh.
Certain structures on a tree are stronger than others, and you want that strong branches.
In case we have
so
a big
that you prune for that, and that's structural. If you're interested in that topic, the University of Florida has some really excellent material, a professor called Ed Gilman. So if you look up Professor Ed Gilman, University of Florida, he's got tremendous amount of information. He's done a lot of research on trees, and he's got a tremendous amount of information on the proper structural method of the proper structure of a tree. The picture we had earlier, that tree had good structure.
Yeah, go ahead.
If any of our guests out there, if you know anybody who's got a tree that has, over the years, somebody's did perform crepe myrtle on it, and it looks like that one in the lower right. There are some ways to save the tree. Basically, it takes several years for it to get healthy again, and not show all that the gnarly wound wood. But basically, you prune back below that, and then as new growth starts, you select the strongest and just kind of keep pruning back the multiple suckers that come off of the prune site, and then you just basically nurse one or two branches so they become thicker, stronger overall. I also did read that these trees, if they're really in really bad shape, you can cut them down just a few inches off the ground and start over and use the same process of just allowing new growth, just selecting a few of the stronger, bigger pieces of new growth and allowing them to grow full size. And then once it gets back up to its normal size, then you can start pruning. You know, something about the size of a pencil. I've read one of the UF documents that says anything bigger than a pencil, you probably shouldn't be pruning out. If it's healthy, if it's not diseased, if it's not crossing and rubbing on something else. And that'll help the tips grow, you know, more and healthier foliage as well as blooms.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so let's move on from our crepe myrtles and talk about something maybe everybody started to worry about this week, and that's cold protection. And normally we get these questions, obviously, when the weather gets colder, but usually it's sometimes after someone's covered something or they've noticed some issues with some of their plants. And I certainly have noticed where I've had things that just this past week kind of are falling flat to the ground a little bit. Not that there was any freeze, but important to know how to properly protect plants when we do have cold weather. And it's just really important that things are covered properly. So Steele, you want to start us off with that one?
Well, let's see. For starters, I would say, remember you want to cover with a cloth, not with a piece of plastic. And I have to tell you that this last week I covered my tomatoes and I didn't put a tomato cage on top of them because I thought I could just rest the cloth gently on them, and I ended up breaking off 2 branches of my tomato. So to have a little structure to hold the cover off the plant, it would probably be a good thing. I should have known that, but I was in a hurry. This is some pictures of things that are properly covered. You'll notice that the cloth goes all the way down to the ground. Another thing that isn't really have to do with covering plants is that if you water it thoroughly, the soil around the plant will stay slightly warmer than the air, or maybe even a lot warmer than the air, and that'll help protect the core of the plant and the roots as well.
I'm glad you mentioned that too. So yes, we can water just around the roots, but we don't in our landscape do what they do for strawberries or citrus, where they run sprinklers to create a coating of ice. So that's not something we would do in the landscape, just to let everybody know. So you could water around the base and then cover it for increased.
You water the day before it gets freezing so that the soil is nice and wet.
Right. Yep. So the most important thing here is to create a structure and then fully cover all the way to the ground, if you decide to cover your plants at all. And I think that, you know, you'll know which ones to cover and which ones not to, and if it's worth your time to cover things. Dave, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, one thing to keep in mind, you know, everybody's talking about freezing temperatures and freezing temperatures. We can have cold damage to plants, even though the temperature doesn't get to freezing. And it all has to do with how the cold weather comes in. And there's different names for it. Basically, frost may not, you know, frost occurs, but it occurs at non-freezing temperatures often. And that's just simply heat leaving the area around the plants at a rapid, you know, in a rapid pace that causes a chilling effect. And that's why you've got frost on plants. You know, and the whole idea of covering a plant is not like us putting on clothing. Plants don't have the ability to warm themselves. You put the cloth on to simply trap the radiant heat that's coming off of the soil that's been heated up during the day. So that's one thing to keep in mind with your plants. Now, if we're going to get, you know, cold temperatures down, you know, in the 20s, which happens rarely, but it has happened here, no matter how much you cover your plant, it's not going to help it. It's still going to get frost damage, freeze damage at those temperatures. The other thing to keep in mind is your potted plants. The soil in them, the heat leaves the soil in potted plants a lot quicker than your in the ground plants. So when you know that cold weather's coming, you know, we talked about watering the day before. Watering a potted plant the day before may not be a good thing because that water is exposed, has more surface area exposed to cool air. So your soil may lose the heat from the day quicker and actually freeze more so than a plant that's in the ground. So you'd probably need to collect up your potted plants and put them, either in the house if you've got that, or in the garage, something like that, or on a side of the house, probably the southern or western side of the house, to prevent any, to help with the loss of the warmth of the soil there. So that's something to keep in mind with your potted plants.
Yeah, and another thing to mention too with potted plants, that made me kind of think of things like orchids, where you may have some things that are susceptible to temperatures that are not 30. They may be susceptible to 40s and 50s even. So, routinely people that grow orchids have to move things, when temperatures get below 50s. So, knowing the hardiness zone that your plant can handle. And we showed this map a couple times. But if it's a more tropical type of plant, it may freeze back to the ground or need protection at a little bit higher temperature. Anything else to add on cold protection? Joe, did you have anything to add?
Well, just to extend what you just said, down at the bottom of Florida down there, the Keys and Miami area, that's a zone 10 and 10B. If you want to try to grow one of those 10B plants up here, you're really asking for trouble. So you do have to know the right plant in the right place. And for most of us, we couldn't grow a 10B plant. Having said that, Polk County has a lot of microclimates, little areas, maybe on the southern end of a lake, but maybe in really a nice protected area. Those, you can sometimes get away with a 10B plant down in an area like that. Most of us can't do it. It'll probably freeze at some point, but that's just the nature of the plant. Every plant is different. So right plant, right place, and we're in zone 9B, put plants in that fit there.
Hey, Joe, you did mention microclimates in the county. Folks should also be aware that you can have microclimates within your own yard. Just on a certain side of the house is different. There's a microclimate. It could be warmer on the southern side of your home. If you've got a large tree, like a large oak tree in your yard, if you put your plants underneath them, they tend not to catch the frost that an open area in your yard. You may have frost out in the front, or you've got no trees at all. In the back, where you've got this huge oak tree, there's no frost on the ground. And basically what happens is that the tree and the leaves of that tree kind of trap the heat in the soil there. So just be aware of that. If you don't have enough places to put your potted plants inside, you can consider putting it, either near other bushes or under a big oak tree. That'll help with the slowing the loss of heat.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. Yeah, and I would say too is, if you really find yourself wanting to grow some of those 10B and higher plants, maybe put those in a container where you can move those in and out, and everything else, can stay and survive on its own. Make it easy for you if this is something you really want to grow. Again, same with your vegetables too. As Celia mentioned, tomatoes. But those are things that if the temperature gets low, you'll have to either decide, do you want to move them in or cover them up? So, think about how much of that work you want to do and what's easier for you, moving them or covering them. And then also, don't forget to remove the covers the next day. Take those off, and the temperature will warm back up during the day, and if it goes down again, then you can recover, but don't just continually leave the covers on for days on end.
Yeah, they can actually have the opposite effect, especially if you're using plastic. It can heat it up too much. But you do want, remove the cover, and you do want the sun to start penetrating the ground to start heating the soil up.
Yep. Great. So lots of information on cold protection. obviously, if you forget any of that, Julie did put a link to some information on proper cold protection, and you can always look up some of the plants that you grow if you're worried about them, and you can find easily what zone they grow in to know if it could be a problem at certain temperatures. Our next thing we were going to talk about, just because of the leaves that fall this time of year, is different uses for those leaves that fall. Mulch and compost are pretty common. Celia, you want to start us off with this one?
Well, okay. I did an experiment in my yard where I left a pile of oak leaves on the ground, and then I went back in a few months and dug it up, and guess what? The oak leaves had decayed into the soil and there were earthworms under there. So adding a layer of oak leaves to the soil can be very beneficial for and actually help you create topsoil. Same thing with pine needles. You can see on that upper left-hand side, there is bark mulch around there, but there's also pine needles on the ground, and they'll decay back into the soil. And if you don't want to do that for some reason, you can just plain old compost it. Stick it in the compost. And in fact, if you have a worm farm, your worms will like a layer of dried leaves as well.
Yeah, those are all great things. And, particularly with the oak leaves, if you have a lot of areas to mulch, it can save you some money if you can use, stuff that's falling, that's, another source of an organic material to benefit your soil too. So
actually, they're quite attractive. I know several gardeners who prefer that dyed red mulch, but it isn't to my personal taste. I think that the pale brown and the light, the tan color of fallen leaves is very attractive. Doesn't distract the eye from your flowers.
No, and you certainly can mix, different types of mulches together. You could use oak leaves for some areas, pine needles for others, and purchase mulch for, other things you want to highlight. I think it's not a problem at all to combine mulches. I mean, we do that in our demonstration gardens, and it always looks very nice and helps define, different areas of the landscape. So, don't forget that you can combine these things together as well. Dave, do you have anything to add to that?
A tip that I just read in one of the EDIS documents not too long ago is for those who don't like, they think that, fallen leaves are unsightly as far as mulch goes. What they can do is go ahead and put the leaves down and then cover them with your quote pretty mulch, so to your pine bark or your pine leaves, pine straw. That way you get the benefit, you're not paying, you can actually reduce the amount of purchased mulch by using fallen leaves. You can put those down first and then cover them with commercial mulch. Another thing to do is if you don't prefer that, you can actually put your fallen leaves behind, out of sight from the street, if that is the look that you're getting. So you get the benefit of the mulch, both in weed suppression as well as nutrient returning back to the plants by using it that way.
Yeah, I would just add to that we just need to make sure that if we are layering mulches, or anytime you're adding oak leaves or other things, is that we want to make sure that the depth of the mulch everywhere is only 2 to 3 inches, and that it's pulled away from the trunk, the base of the plant, all of those sorts of things. It's real easy to, have a self-mulching area and let oak leaves continually fall, and all of a sudden you've got 6 inches of mulch and then you start to have issues. We have had issues over the years at the demonstration gardens in Bartow because oak leaves fell for many years in planting beds that used to be level with all of our sidewalks, and then ended up, years later being 6 to 8 inches higher than sidewalks, and really being way too deep, and correcting that problem is pretty tricky. So, just remember that it still needs to be that same depth of regular mulch. We had a question come in. Can we talk about low sun mulched areas that develop fungus? So shady areas that could have mulch with things growing on them.
There are some really cool fungus that develops on mulch. There's one kind that looks like a bird nest with little eggs in it. And there's another kind I've seen that's bright orange.
Yes. So yeah, it's common. I'm guessing most people don't want to have fungus in their mulch.
You know what else? That dog vomit fungus pops up. It's not actually a fungus, but it pops up occasionally. I don't
Yes.
know.
I mean, it's a natural process of the breakdown of material. I mean, you got critters working in there. How do you, I mean, if it becomes a problem, I guess you could simply remove the mulch.
Or just rake it up, break up
Yeah.
the mushrooms.
I think you could simply rake those leaves around and try to keep them a little bit drier, and that'll help prevent fungus from growing.
Yeah,
So just rake it up so there's got more air between the leaves, and obviously that'll hide the fungus so you can't see it. It's natural, so it's not going to really hurt the plant.
In fact, the fungus is what's breaking the leaves down so that your plant's roots can pick up the nutrients.
Yeah, usually those things like the funguses will occur in areas that, again, are shady, but also too wet. So really make sure that you don't have an irrigation system that's watering a lot in those areas, particularly with, I mean, we've had some rainfall, but you know, this time of year too, we need to also cut back. So that less water should help a little bit.
You kind of got to, as a general rule, it's not a problem, but yeah, there is one which Julie and I had to deal with a couple of weeks ago, and it's either called shotgun fungus or artillery fungus, and it's common in mulch that stays wet, but it basically shoots these little pellets up onto your wall and stains the wall, and there's to date nothing made by man that can remove it other than painting over it. And so there actually is a link that Julie put in the chat room that talks specifically about artillery fungus, but it's something that I guess is quite common here now in Florida. I never experienced it before, so it took a little research when I got, hey, what's all over my wall? That happened in the plant clinic. So, but yeah, that's one you want to keep control of and get out of your away from your house anyway. And it can get on anything. It shoots. I mean, it literally shoots these spores up to 30 feet if you got a strong wind. And I saw some stuff in the EDIS documents about how it's getting on automobile and it's messing the paint up. So that's one you got to need to be careful. Little black dots. I guess like shotgun BBs.
Okay, so if anybody has questions on that, you can type them in the chat. We're going to move quickly and talk a little bit about plants that we might be thinking about a little bit more this time of year. So things that we might be purchasing to plant in our own yards or to give as gifts or that sort of thing. We specifically were highlighting poinsettias and Christmas cactus, but other houseplant questions and things you might have. We're going to start talking about poinsettias. Joe, you want to start us off with that one?
Okay, real simply, if assuming you're bringing it in, you buy it in the store and bring it into your house as decorations for Christmas, you don't want to water it until the soil surface is dry to the touch. Okay, and obviously you want a saucer underneath it when you water because you want that water to run through the plant, and then you're going to let it alone. Okay, you keep it in a place that does not get nice cold drafts because cold drafts will hurt the plant. Other than that, I'll pass over to someone else because I tend not to take care of house plants. I'm terrible with house plants. I got one orchid that I can keep going. It's beautiful. But other than that, my house plants don't do well. So I prefer things outside. So let's let somebody else answer this question.
Celia or Dave, do you have anything to add on poinsettias and care, and maybe even what one could do with poinsettias after holidays when they maybe don't want them for decoration?
I can answer that unless you want to, Dave.
All right, hey.
Okay, so poinsettias can be planted out in the yard. They need light shade. That means under a dappled shade, not full sun, not deep shade. There are some pests that will munch on them, so keep an eye on them, see if somebody's eating them. They need, you can prune them back, but you got to prune them back early in the year, like, like May or June or July. You don't want to prune them in the fall or late summer, because that's when they're setting their flower buds. Poinsettias and Christmas cactus and Thanksgiving cactus all need dark in order to set flower buds. So they got to have long, dark nights. So if you put one of these plants someplace where there's a back porch light or a night light or something like that shining on them, they won't set buds. So Christmas cactus, on the other hand, they don't do well in the ground. They're epiphytes in their natural habitat, which means they live up in trees. And so they do quite well if you let them stay pot bound. See how big that one is on the right? And look at the size of the pot, small pot, and that's probably been in there forever. And again, Christmas cactus and Thanksgiving cactus all need dark in order to set flower buds. Once the flower buds are set, you can bring them into the house or put them someplace where there's light on them at night. It's another plant, like Joe said, don't overwater it. Be careful not to let it sit in water, and just water it when it's dry. And I want to put in a plug here for moisture testers. My finger is not properly calibrated to tell if a plant needs water, so I use a moisture tester on my house plants. Over to you.
Thanks, Celia. Yeah, a lot of these that are, blooming, plants that bloom this time of year are forced to bloom. And so, just remember that as you're purchasing.
And poinsettias all bloom in response to increasing night length. So
yes, so
are natural. They're naturally blooming. There is an Easter cactus as well, but it tends to bloom all year long.
Great. And I would say too, if this is something you're considering giving as a gift, you can pull this fact sheet or some of the links that we have and include it.
Yep,
with whomever you're giving it to. Yeah, I think that would be really appreciated. I mean, that's something real simple. You can print those for free, or, send us an email and we can send you the direct link, and you can, print those up for whomever you're giving that gift to. Okay, so, and then we're about coming to the end of the webinar. So I just wanted to make sure that if anybody has any other questions on anything that we covered, or anything else, obviously.
Well, there was that question about squash, right?
Oh, we did have a question about squash. Yes, that came in. Thanks for reminding me. We did have some last minute questions that came in when people were registering. And if for some reason we missed them, go ahead and type them in the chat, and I'll get to whatever last questions that we might have. Yeah, the question that came in was about squash rotting. Is that right? Was that what that was, Celia?
Yeah, it was squash rotting. So
okay.
There's a lot of different possible answers, and we don't really have time to discuss it. So you're more than welcome to call the extension during the week and talk about it to a master gardener. But primarily, the reason that your squash is rotting is that there's been some damage to the skin and a fungus has gotten in. So it could be like a stink bug has stuck its darn little beak into the plant, or it could be you've left it on the ground where there's some reason the skin has gotten damaged by, I don't know, something underneath, a slug crawled on it and opened the skin up. But that's the main reason why plants rot, is fungus. So it's not possible for me to tell just from hearing that it's rotting, but that's what you're looking for, something that damaged the skin of the plant so that the fungus could get in. Okay, is there another question?
Yes, there's another question that came in, and I'll give it to Dave. You can take this one. So this question is about a hibiscus. It was pruned in February, March, and hasn't really recovered. It barely has 10 leaves. Is it transplantable, or any idea of what might be going on with that hibiscus?
Yeah, hibiscus are kind of very fickle. And it depends on your soil, your moisture, and how much sun it's getting. So you talk about, first of all, the question is, where is it in your yard and how much sun is it getting? And does the soil drain well? How much are you watering it? Things like that. Have you fertilized it at all? So, ask those questions of yourself. And those could all be a factor on why it's not recovering as quickly. Yes, you can. If you find that it's not in an ideal location, it's on the north side of your house, perhaps not getting the proper sun, or under, somewhere else where it's being shaded out, you can dig it up and put it into a better location. There's a lot of things. Temperature also, we talked about right plant, right place. Joe talked about 9B or 10B plants, trying to plant them up here. So just be aware that the most hibiscus they're not rated for the zone that we're in. So almost every year we get cold damage on hibiscus, and that'll happen. One thing we did not mention when we were talking about cold damage is, what do you do with the damaged pieces of the tree once it happens? Just kind of a general rule of thought is, don't immediately prune that, the dead or damaged plant material out just yet. Kind of wait till the
Spring.
cold season is over with, and then make the removal cuts at that time. Don't do anything to encourage any additional growth. Don't do any fertilizing in the winter time, because that may cause it to flush with new growth, and new growth is more susceptible than your older growth. So just kind of wait. Everybody sees that dead and nasty looking stuff in the yard, and they want to run out and get rid of it. But just be disciplined and avoid the temptation of going out and doing it.
Yeah,
just
because
wait a little longer.
Just because the leaves look dead doesn't mean the stem is dead. It might grow new leaves in the spring, and you might have a perfectly good plant in 4
Right.
months.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that really, really important thing that we forgot to say, because people do, it's real hard. You get itchy to clean up everything, particularly if you've had a lot of dieback on things, and it's warm again in 2 months and you want to cut everything back. But typically we tell people to wait till the beginning of March to prune things back. And I know that's tricky, but remember, it's just an extra layer of protection for those plants. So consider that it's an extra layer of protection, and you just get a little bit longer of a break for having to do lots of yard work, right? Just say, I can't go out there and do yard work right now. It's supposed to be that way. So I'm glad you brought that up.
That's a good lead in to our guide and journal, because that information is available in the guide, so you don't have to remember it, right?
It is, yeah. So the last thing we kind of wanted to just talk about, and again, if anybody has any last questions, we just have a few minutes left. Go ahead and type them in the chat. But we do have a brand new garden guide and journal that we are selling. It's 84 pages, I think now. We've just made some edits to it and added some more pages. But it's a month-by-month guide. It's not a calendar, because it's, just monthly. But it kind of just helps you know what to do each month in your landscape and for your edible plants. And then there's also a place for you to take notes or make any observations or comments on what you're growing. And all of the proceeds for this benefit our Master Gardener Volunteer Program, which obviously is presenting this webinar today. So, supporting the efforts of all of the gardening and landscaping education that Master Gardener volunteers do. But really what we've done with this, and this was all designed and created by Master Gardener volunteers, right down to the little graphics and drawings. I mean, that is all from Master Gardeners. So it's really, really cool. Makes a great gift, something you can use. I mean, you can start it at any time. You can use it multiple years in a row. You don't need to ditch it every year like a calendar. But we've kind of just taken a lot of our IFAS publications and, picked out the important things to think about each month and put them into just the one guide. So if you're interested, the only way for us to do this now for purchase is to have you click on the link that Julie put in the chat, and then you mail your payment with a form, and then we would then stick it in the mail to you. Normally we'd be selling them out of the office and other places, but that's just what we're doing now. And I mentioned we did have an edit that we just did and we're working on. So we are about to run another printing, but if you have questions, you know, you can let us know if there's any questions on it, but you can see from the slides kind of what it looks like inside. It's just a really great resource, and we're really proud of what we've put together for everybody. So I did want to mention that. Okay, so we just have a couple minutes left. We have lots of resources, all of these links, everything in the chat and everything on this resources page, we will send out in an email to you. So after this, whenever we send the email that has the link to our survey for the webinar, we will also send all of these links to you, so you don't have to scramble and write down everything on this page. And then normally, with many of our webinars, we will post them onto YouTube. We've, I think, been doing that with some of our Ask the Experts, so you'll be able to reference that later as well. And if for some reason we didn't get to your question, or something pops up later, as I know it often does, you start thinking about it, you can see on the screen there the contact information for our plant clinic. So our plant clinic is open every day during the week, Monday through Friday. Phone calls and emails, we aren't taking walk-ins, but there's plenty we can do via phone or email. And now that we've got our webcam working in the plant clinic with Celia, we can also do any kind of virtual consultations if we need to do that as well. And we're going to work towards that as well. And I think that'll be really helpful for people that, have an issue and don't want to drive to Bartow whenever that's allowed anyway. So, okay, so we're going to close out, and then I'm just going to kind of go down if there's anything our panelists our experts want to add. At the end, I'll just kind of go down and you guys can make any final comments on anything. Final questions can go in the chat box just for the last couple minutes. So Celia, is there any final comment or anything you wanted to add?
No, I just want to point out to people that now is a great time to make wreaths out of your grapevines.
Oh, good point. Yeah. And we do have some holiday webinars, our 15-minute webinars this month are different things you can do with holiday decor. We have lots of information on ways to decorate, things you can make out of objects in your yard that are really super fun too. Dave, do you have anything you want to add?
Just with the poinsettias, once the holiday season's over and you decide that you're going to keep it and move it outside and put it in the yard, as you prune it, don't throw those cuttings away. You can use them as new starts, and then you won't have to go out and buy a poinsettia for next year. You can the new starts you can start growing, and then those could be your houseplants or gifts for next year.
Yeah, good point. Always good to be able to reuse things, right? Joe, anything last you would like to add?
Well, I think just thanks everybody for coming, and have a great holiday.